Now, everything that we've been editing so far has been global and affecting the entire document. And let's just say you have different lists or different paragraphs that you want to affect specifically. There's different ways of doing that. So we have these two paragraphs on the page. We have ingredients and directions. But let's just say I want directions to be bolder and bigger than ingredients already is. But they're both paragraph tags. How am I supposed to actually style one and the other? You can't. So there's these attributes called classes. You can add a class attribute to a particular tag and then write CSS that affects only that class. So let's add a class, and I'll name it anything, so I'll just write directions to keep it simple. Now that we've added this class in our HTML, we can go back to our CSS and edit just that class. So if I go back to CSS and then I type .directions, so you'll notice that I put a period before the actual directions selector. That's because whenever you use a class, you have to put a period before it because it's not actually an HTML tag. When we've edited tags before, the body is its own separate tag and the image is its own separate tag, but directions is a class. So I want directions to actually be bold. That's another property that we can do. So we go to font, weight, colon, and then you can say bold. And that's all there is to it. If I were to save both of these and then go back to our page, you'll notice first of all that it's not going to be centered anymore. But also, directions is just slightly bolder than these are the ingredients. Now, it's something subtle, but it's something that you might run into as you start getting more and more complex websites. What I'm going to do is I'm going to edit directions. Instead of being just bold, I'm also going to add the color white. Now, the hex color for white is FFF. And you're able to look that up online. Now let's just say we have all kinds of list items, which we do. We have strawberries, we have oatmeal, love, and then the directions on how to actually make things. And let's just say I want to edit one specific kind of list item, and I don't want to use a class. You can use an ID. Now the difference between the class attribute and the ID attribute is that classes are able to be reused. So for example, I could put a class directions, just because I feel like it, on this last item, and it will also be bold and white, which is kind of fun, but this is more just for direction. Now instead, let's just say I wanted to add an ID. So I'm going to add an ID to this direction and call it love, for example. Now, an ID is unique and a class is not. So I can have the love ID on just one item in the HTML page, but I can have a class called directions, for example, throughout the page. So let's style this ID in CSS. Now when you style IDs, it's similar to classes where you have to style it differently. Only instead of a period, you do a pound sign. So you do pound ID, and then you can style it in any way that you want. We've covered font weight and we've covered color already, so let's try something else, and we'll italicize anything with the ID of love. So we're going to type font, style, and then italic. So when I save that and then move over to our page, you might notice that love right here is italic, and that's because love is very important. Great! And so now we've covered these different types of kind of separating different things in your text. So let's just say that you have something specific that you want to style within a certain tag. So you have your paragraph here, these are the ingredients, but you want to style the word ingredients. What you can do is you can add a span. So if I added a span tag within this paragraph tag around the word ingredients, now you can style that span. Now, you might have different spans throughout your web page if it gets very big. And so what you can do is you can style specifically just spans only within paragraphs. And that's just a different type of CSS. So paragraphs and spans are their own tags, but because you want to style the span inside the paragraph, you do P for the outside tag and span for the inside tag. So that will only select the spans within the paragraphs. And let's just say for ingredients, we want to change the color of that to red. So if we were to save that and then refresh our page, you notice that the word ingredients is now red. So spans help us with inline editing when you want to edit just a particular part within the line of something. Let's just say you want to edit a whole block. That's when divs come into play. So let's add a div tag, div, around all of our text. And I'm just going to tab all of these over so that way it's easier to see. So when we style the div, it's just like styling any other tag, but now we know that it consists of a lot of things. So let's just say in our div, we want everything in that div to have a border. So you can add the border property, and we want the width of our border to be 2 pixels. We want it to have a solid style, and we want it to be yellow. Now this is pretty standard for when you're editing borders. A border always has a size as the first part of it, a style as the second part of it. It could be solid or dotted or dashed, and then it can have a color. So we have a funny little border there, and when we go over to our div, you can see that we have that solid yellow border that's just a little bit wider than 1 pixel. So now you've learned how to separate different parts of your page with divs, spans, classes, and IDs. Now again, classes and IDs are just attributes, and divs and spans are HTML tags, and all of those can be affected differently with CSS.